So here's Mike Johnson with the impending end of the shutdown, forcing him into a position where he has to start trying to explain why exactly they are not releasing the Epstein files yet.
You say that you're for full transparency, so why not just urge all your Republicans to vote for this massive Connell bill on the Epstein files next week? Put out all the files. Let the American public judge for themselves what these files are
Thank
all
you
about.
for.
Yeah, well, that answers pretty much every objection that the MAGA pod bros have been able to come up with. Like, it's very simple. Like, yeah, sure. I do think the Democrats are selectively releasing these emails. So why would you point that out and not call for the release of all the files? Because of course that's not what it's about for them.
Asking the question, we have been for maximum transparency of the Epstein files from the very beginning. What I was opposed to is the reckless disregard that was used in drafting the discharge petition. And we've been over this many times, but it was not drafted in such a way that it would adequately protect innocent victims. We have a responsibility to do that. There's as many as 1,000 women, by some estimates, of people who have been victimized because of the sex trafficking and Epstein and all these horrendous, heinous crimes, and we can't have them subjected to any further harm. So we wanted to make sure that they were properly, whose names were properly redacted out of the files. But the discharge petition is not only reckless, it is also a totally moot point. The Oversight Committee has been working, as you all know, around the clock, working on this. And you have some of the toughest members of Congress on the Republican and Democrat side who are working in bipartisan fashion to go through and release those files. As we stand here tonight, I think we're up to over 50,000 pages of records that are out in the open. You can go online tonight if you're at home and go through it yourself.
And almost all of those files were already publicly available through court records.
Right.
Trust me, bro. Not drafted the right way is DC code for our friends won't like what's in the files. Stop pretending process is the problem. So finally, Adalita Grijalva was seated. Indeed, she has been the long pending 218th vote.
What is most concerning is not what this administration has done, but what the majority in this body has failed to do. Hold Trump accountable as a co-equal branch of government that we are. It has been 50 days since the people of Arizona's 7th Congressional District elected me to represent them. 50 days that over 800,000 Arizonans have been left without access to the basic services that every constituent deserves. This is an abuse of power. One individual should not be able to unilaterally obstruct the swearing in of a duly elected member of Congress for political reasons.
Now, many people believe, with some reason, that she was not sworn in order to avoid that 218th vote. Johnson claimed it was because the government was shut down. We showed an interview with her where she said, no, there are many people who have been sworn in during government shutdowns. It's not actually an impediment. But with her swearing in, now the Trump administration got pretty desperate and started making some phone calls. Thomas Massey talks about this a little bit here.
And how many Republicans do you think will vote for this on the floor?
Well, I've already had a couple Republicans tell my office privately that they're going to vote for it, and I think that could snowball. I mean, the deal for Republicans on this vote is that Trump will protect you if you vote the wrong way. In other words, if you vote to cover up for pedophiles, you've got cover in a Republican primary. But I would remind my colleagues that this vote is going to be on your record for longer than Trump is going to be president. And what are you going to do in 2028 and 2030 when you're in a debate, either with a Republican or a Democrat, and they say, how can we trust you? You covered up for a pedophile back in 2025.
You could argue Trump's endorsement is a liability.
And the goal
now
for Thomas Massey then, Jake, is to get 70 House Republicans.
Yes. So they called in for whatever reason. they decided that Boebert was the weak link and called her in to a private meeting in the Situation Room. Carolyn Levitt was asked about this.
Because of Republicans and President Trump.
But given your interest in transparency, Caroline, why are White House officials then meeting with Representative Boebert in an effort to try and get her to not sign this petition calling for the release of the files?
Doesn't it show transparency that members of the Trump administration are willing to brief members of Congress whenever they please? Doesn't that show our level of transparency?
Nicely done.
Doesn't that show the level
Gotta give
of
you credit for
transparency
that
when
one.
we are willing to sit down with members of Congress and address their concerns?
We're willing to sit them down and say, you better help us cover up the Epstein files. That's transparency.
Having discussions with members of Congress about various issues, and I'm not going to detail conversations that took place in the Situation Room, in the press briefing room. Reagan.
I mean, look, I will give her some that job. It's kind of like being a lawyer. You're being paid to be a professional liar. She's unflappable, man. She is unflappable. Like, you really need somebody who has no sense of dignity or shame in that job. And Carolyn Levitt has no dignity or no shame. Like, that is quite a pile of bullshit to sell to the American public. No, that is transparency. We're not strong arming Lauren Boebert because we think that we have the best chance at changing her mind. We want to be transparent with her. We called her in for a briefing.
Yeah.
Called her in for a briefing. Yeah. This was a pretty funny response to this. Propagandoff. It fucking rocks that the release of the Epstein files, which may or may not confirm that the president of the United States is a PDF file, depends largely on a congresswoman who was documented giving some guy a hand job at a Beetlejuice musical.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
God bless her. God bless her.
That was a great moment in American history, and I mean that sincerely. I think that was a warm, celebratory moment. I always appreciated that about her.
Well, me too. And if you've seen the musical, you can understand. It's a very hot musical.
Yeah.
Very sexy.
God forbid anybody have any fun anymore.
Yeah, Yeah. Her and Pee Wee Herman.
Yeah.
Jamie Raskin. Fresh from their 6-week paid vacation, Speaker Johnson finally swore in Congresswoman Adelita Grijalva. A majority of the House has now signed the discharge petition for full release of the Epstein files. Let's vote. And here's Massey with his unlikely bedfellow Ro Khanna. They've been working together on getting the files released for a while now.
I got to give credit to Lauren Boebert to walk into the White House, the center of power, the free world, really, and to sustain that and to come back out and to be solid, and also to Nancy Mace and Marjorie Taylor Greene. There was all the speculation that they might take their names off, and they never did. So it's not a hoax. It's not a moot point. It is a very serious thing. There are 1,000 victims, and there are survivors who have had a press conference with Ro Khanna and I, and that's what we're fighting for, justice for them.
Did y'all talk to them at any point during this, as the White House was making clear they were targeting these members?
I talked to them. I don't want to say which one I had this conversation with, but one of them was told, we can't let Massey have a win. How petty is that? I mean, this is more than about political wins. It's about getting transparency and justice, which, by the way, this administration promised. You have the Vice President, J.D. Vance, you have the AG, you have the FBI director. They've all done a 180 on this.
So the White House said to one of these members that they didn't want you to have a win here.
That's correct.
I mean,
he's got the win. Doesn't matter.
Right.
Doesn't matter.
He's taken the principled stand. And I don't care if Miriam Adelson gives them $800 trillion. They are not knocking him out of that seat. And that's going to be another major blow to their credibility and to their ability to get the people with the real power not to just push Trump out the door. So Marjorie Taylor Greene tweeted out after the vote, next week we will be voting to release the Epstein files. I honestly believe it's not only the right thing to do for the victims, but it's also the right thing to do for the country. Americans deserve transparency. Remember, Democrats had 4 years under Biden to release it all, but never even tried or cared. And listen, you got a lot of people who are using that almost as a non sequitur. It's like, yeah, that's true. And so we should release it, right? Like to
Right.
use that as an argument to deflect from releasing the files is ridiculous. This is an honest case of pointing that out. I think that's a worthy thing to point out. Yeah, are these Democrats completely hypocritical? Did they say anything about this when Biden was president? That's absolutely true. And that's a valid point to make as long as, like Marjorie Taylor Greene, you want to get these files released.
Right.
If you're trying to argue that as a deflection from getting them released, you're a fucking clown.
Yes.
Now, under full Republican control, there were only 4 Republicans that signed the discharge petition for the Massey resolution to release the Epstein files. Thomas Massey, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Nancy Mace, Lauren Boebert. Next week, when everyone is forced to go on record to vote to release the Epstein files, I expect the number of Republicans to be a lot higher that actually vote yes, and then we're all going to a production of Beetlejuice. No.
Yeah.
But remember the original 4. Yeah, man. Yeah, man. You know, they stuck it out. Now it's clear the walls really are closing in this time. So it's yes, you're going to see more Republicans get on board with it next week. Everyone's expecting that. Even Johnson concedes you're going to get a lot more Republican votes. But man, they took that stand from the beginning when it wasn't clear that Trump's Teflon was not going to keep him protected in this particular case, and they took that position as Massey always does. You know, let's not get it twisted. I do not agree with Massey's ideas about economics. His issue with the big beautiful bill was really that it didn't cut social spending enough, right? That's who he is. But you know what? I'll have a debate and an argument with an uncorrupt libertarian. At least you're dealing with somebody who is actually honestly, sincerely coming from a place of belief in his principles. And with somebody like that, you can actually predict what they're going to do because they're going to act on those principles. So Massey, I mean, that's why he's unbendable. And that's why he's so popular, even with people like us who on most things would not agree with Thomas Massey.
Well, it's fascinating what you're seeing here because what you're seeing here is a tipping point. And I think this is the tipping point.
Yes,
and you're going to see the scales really reverse from here on out. So when they call Boebert into a room and try and browbeat her into changing her vote, they're assuming that their endorsement, meaning the Trump White House, that their endorsement and their stamp of approval.
Before you go?
Yeah. They're assuming that their stamp of approval means something. Their stamp of approval means about as much as Trump's grip on the Republican base. Once Trump loses his grip on the Republican base, his endorsement doesn't mean anything. Once Trump becomes toxic to the Republican base, which is on the way to happening, his endorsement becomes toxic with it, which means you're going to see a point, and I think you're seeing the point right now, where people are not only not intimidated at the idea of losing Trump's support, they feel like they have to distance themselves from Trump. That's why Mike Johnson is expecting as many defectors as he is in the upcoming vote. Now, the way that presents itself in terms of actually getting these files released is as follows. It's a long and difficult process because this now has to clear 60 votes in the Senate. So you say, well, how's it going to do that? Well, again, the likelihood that Republicans will defect depends on how toxic the Trump brand is. So if you have mass defections in the House where Republicans are voting to release the files, at that point, momentum builds towards getting to 60 votes. If you get to 60 votes and Trump vetoes the bill, which he likely will, now you need 2/3 majority to override that veto, which again, the more you draw out this timeline, the worse and worse this looks. The closer and closer you get to the midterms next year, the more afraid Republicans are going to be, not of crossing Trump, but of standing by Donald Trump. So now you get to a 2/3 majority, override the veto. Now Pam Bondi has to decide whether or not she tells them to go fuck themselves, because what this does is compels the DOJ to do it. What happens if she just folds her arms and say, well, I'm not complying with this, right?
She very well might.
At that point, this is just becoming a bigger and bigger nightmare, assuming you don't get the files released in time for the midterms. Like, assuming Trump blocks you in every move, in every way he can, that creates bigger and bigger political headaches and makes the Trump brand more and more toxic. So I think what you saw here was the tipping of that scale, where they can't call Lauren Boebert into a room and get her to change her vote, because Lauren Boebert sees the writing on the wall that Trump is now a liability in Republican politics. And that's a first. That's a first. Yep. And that dynamic is going to get worse and worse and worse as the next year moves on. That's why I'm telling you not to, be doom and gloom, or not to be alarmist and not to change the subject too much. But 2026 is potentially a very scary year, because these people understand now that unless things get really abnormal, quote unquote, they are going to lose power. They're going to lose power. And you could be looking at a situation where, as the more and more toxic Trump becomes, the stronger and stronger the likelihood of a 25th Amendment type situation, of an impeachment with a conviction, 2/3. I mean, you're talking about this as a time bomb waiting to explode, plus people's healthcare costs doubling, plus inflation getting worse and worse and worse, plus Medicaid cuts coming. There's just no sign that this is going to turn around absent a mass disruption of American life. And this is the beginning of that period right now, which is why it's important, in all seriousness, for people to try and find common ground and unite on things that really matter. Because as you can see, these people at the end of the day are paper tigers if they don't have the people behind them. And that's what makes them terrified. And that's what makes them scary. But they're going to lose in the end. Obviously, you could see the writing on the wall now. MAGA is dead. It's over. It's a dead movement.
Yeah, it's a dead movement, but will the people behind them lose? I just had a tweet that, got some visibility, where I shared a chart of the top employers of SNAP recipients in Arkansas. Of course, Walmart is number one. You got McDonald's and Dollar General and, your usual suspects. And I cannot say, whenever you put something like that out on social media, there is nothing that brings out the broken peasant-minded people like something like that. So what do you want to tax them at? Oh, well, so what percentage of their workers really get? Most of them are probably part-time workers. How do they get like that? How do working people get programmed in such a way that their idea of how to assert kind of pride and particularly, masculine power is to defend the wealthy? That takes a lot of fucking brainwashing. And you have to remember, social media is the best instrument for brainwashing people ever devised, because as the AI and the algorithm gets more and more sophisticated, it's getting better and better at curating your reality. So if you're the kind of person who has already been brainwashed into that, you're going to keep getting fed that kind of rage bait. You're going to keep getting fed the kinds of people who are going to keep reinforcing that. This makes it very difficult to see how you get out the other side without basically society burning down to the point that people are ready to consider the idea that they've been brainwashed. Wow. People are so programmed to fight each other over tribal kind of points of honor that have nothing to do with improving the quality of their lives. They're so divided. They're so lacking in class consciousness. It's hard to see how you get out of it.
Well, I mean, you're talking about oligarchy. You're certainly not voting your way out of oligarchy. You can only organize your way out of oligarchy, right?
And it's hard to see how that organizing happens. It really, I'm not trying to be a doomer. I'm not trying to be a black pillar. But I don't think you can solve a problem without acknowledging what the problem is.
No, well, that's
And
what I
it's
mean. Well, yeah,
yeah.
but this, I think, could potentially be a moment where, like, when you have, you know, an administration like this that has gone as mask off as this just implode in the way that it is. I think that is potentially a wake up call for a lot of people, because look at how
I
many
would
people got suckered into this just a
sure
year ago. Usually these things take a little
sure
time. You know, usually these things
that's
don't go to
helpful.
shit as quickly. Yeah. Yeah.
That's helpful, but look at it in your segment where you saw what Benny Johnson is
Mhm.
pushing and so on. They're just going to try to keep them within the same mindset without Trump. So the question of how people actually evolve into a place where this is not where they understand that nobody's coming to save them, and you have to organize along class lines. And
Yeah.
I'm not putting that all on the right wing. I did a whole segment about how the DSA, you know, their fucking bright idea is they want to lead with bringing in trans youth for free gender medicine to New York City. Like that, there's that too. And that is another side of this brainwashing where people have been brainwashed on the left into taking up these extremely unpopular cultural positions. And over time, I've come to believe that's a psyop too. That's so that people don't want to go and join people on the left. It is just hard when you look at how broken people are mentally, at how completely out of tune with reality they are. It's hard to see how you have to rebuild their whole way of looking at reality at this point. Like, and that's not a partisan thing. That's across society. That's society wide. You have a very mentally broken working class, a lot of which thinks it's middle class, but they're actually working class.
No, of course. Of course.
Please clap.